Insects do not. They have this hard, chitinous outer shell to them. And obviously, if you have a hard outer shell, it doesn't make it very easy to grow because you have to figure out a way to get out of that shell. So what they do is molt, and they will grow a little bit and then shed their skin. And with each molting, they typically change in both size and in appearance. All insects begin as eggs. Now, you may not always see the eggs, and in fact, some insects, the egg stage hatches within the particularly aggressive feeders. This is a good example. In a butterfly or moth, we know that very often the caterpillars or larval stages will consume a lot of plant material. But in fact, the butterfly might just eat a little bit of nectar and not be any kind of a pest problem at all. Very different feeding between the different stages. And examples of insects that do have complete metamorphosis are bees, moths, ants, beetles, mosquitoes. Beautiful looking caterpillars, yellow and this kind of lavender and black. The tricky part is the black hairs burn. They have a poison on them, they're irritating, so if they touch you, it's like touching a caterpillar, but you get these welts on your skin. So it's not a bad burn, it's just a little bit unpleasant. But it can be aggravating if you're trying to pick grapes and they're in the grapevines. Then you have the pupal stage that you see here, and the worms have just gone from that instar, from the 5th instar, and they're buried deep within the cocoon. And then they molt to this adult stage of a moth. And that doesn't even look much like a moth, does it? They're really almost the woolly bear caterpillar, so those are all moth larvae. But what about the one on the bottom? That's a larvae also. It looks quite different, doesn't it? Very good, very good. It is a ladybird beetle. You'd be surprised how many times I go out to vineyards and people see a bunch of those on the stakes and they want to kill them. So, good. Okay, a little bit more about insect development. Let's talk a little bit about on development so far. Nothing? This is the quick run through. Insect feeding. Insect feeding, of course, is going to depend on the mouth parts of the insect. And we really have about 3 or 4, 5 different types of mouth parts that we find on insects. But in general, you could lump them into these 2 categories, sucking insects or chewing insects. One thing that you need to remember, too, among the differences between the larvae and the adult, is that they may have very, very different mouth parts than the adult. And very often, larvae will have chewing mouth parts, whereas the adults do not. If you have chewing mouth parts, then obviously you can eat whole. You can eat whole leaves. These would be defoliators, we might call them. If you're internal, if you're inside a leaf or inside a twig, if you're inside a twig, you'd be a borer, but you're still eating, consuming whole chunks of plant material. If you're inside a leaf, inside the 2 layers of a leaf, we call that a leaf miner. Over on the right. And that is an example of a leaf miner. And all that's happening there is that you've got a little, very, very small larvae that's in between the 2 layers on the leaf, and it's just chewing some of the tissue. They can cause deformity, and very importantly, a lot of piercing, sucking insects can be vectors of plant diseases. You see a couple here. Here's a good example of just exsanguination, extracting out the chlorophyll. That's for leafhopper damage right there. Over here, what is that? Anybody have an idea? Non-mealybug. It looks a lot like mealybug. Gets diagnosed as that a lot. That's a good guess. It looks like it. That's a woolly apple aphid on roots. And in its feeding damage, it causes these galls. And often we can see galls with some mouth part damage from insects. Then down here on the bottom, anybody know what this is? Just about, it's one of like the top 5 most famous insects in California right now. Glassy winged sharpshooter, yes. This little guy is getting millions and millions of dollars thrown at it because it's a relatively new exotic pest in California. It's been here for 10 years, has been present in Florida for a very long time. Doesn't do very much damage, really. It's not